Hello, this is Mad Cat, the angry egalitarian that discusses this and that. Today is part 2 of analyzing the men's rights survey. And remember, I have nothing to say, so this is a freebie. All right, so I'm hoping to do a little bit of improvement from last time. I know last time was like 3 hours long. Some really great conversations, a lot of thoughts and opinions and facts given out. And, when you get something like that really going, it's hard to stop it. It's hard to really just say, hey, everyone shut up. We need to get through this. So, anyways, I'm going to try to do something a little bit different today to try to get through this information as fast as we can. Hopefully, we get some people who want to join us. However, if you do come into the video and just want to say something in the chat, I'm more than happy to try to read your comments. Or if you want to leave a comment down below about any questions you have, I'll see if I can get that onto the next episode. Now, I do want to make a quick mention to my Gamergator watchers out there, or anyone who's in the men's rights movement, or just happens to be an egalitarian of some sort. I am trying to do a Gamergate meetup in Arizona. We got a couple of people out there who are interested, but I'm trying to get like a little bit more of a following for it first. We're currently at like 7 people. I'm hoping to get at least 15 people interested because, not everyone's able to show up when a date is given. So I want to try to get as many people as I can there. Anyways, I'm shooting for a July-August meetup. So if you're interested, just go ahead and tweet either directly to me, which is ggmad_cat, or the hashtag GGNPHX. Either one of those will get my attention. I am watching GGNPHX, so GGINPHX. I'm watching that, so if you post to it, I will know pretty quickly. All right, so let's go ahead and start analyzing this. Now, what I'm going to be doing differently is I'm going to be trying to group up a couple of different things together. So that way we can discuss multiple things at once. All right, so there we go. I don't know why it's showing my bar there. Maybe it went to full screen. Hold on a sec. Yeah, it did. That's not what I wanted. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, we have 420 responses. There's a joke there, but I can't think of anything. Sarcasm. So we have quite a few since we last did this video. I believe we have about 21 responses since then. So I thank everyone who's responded. You will see that we still have a bigger number of females taking this survey than we do males. It's about a difference of 6%. Sorry, a potential guest is communicating to me. So I'm always looking for people to join me. I love taking different opinions and viewpoints and giving shout outs to my friends. So, if you ever want to do something with me, just reach out to me. I'm always interested in doing something. So anyways, it's a difference of 6%, but I'm okay actually with more females taking this because, well, let's face it, female voices do carry more than males, and feminists are always attacking men for being sock puppets of females. We need more females out there giving their opinion and voices to show that there are women who are getting sick and tired of feminism, but that are also in very big support of men's rights, about men's issues. So, but we also do have that a majority do identify as being male gender. So we're not going to go through the rest of these stats, but I'll kind of scroll through them so you can see them. You can kind of pause them to get an idea of what it's going through, or take the survey yourself and see if you want. It is going to be listed down below the survey. So if you want to take it, go ahead. I definitely encourage you to. I would love to see this get up to 1,000. I think at 1,000 would be when I would do this again. Should exit out of that. All right. So anyways, let's go to the next section here. Yeah, this was a really long section. All right. Multiple choice questions. So I've already done up the math, so let me go ahead and do that now. Okay, so we're going to be addressing both of these issues right now. So, legal versus social, and you can take your own analysis of this, but this is my analysis. Now, first, we're dealing with the social disadvantages that men and women have. Which one has more social disadvantage, men or women? Now, about 38% believed, or rather, let me state this first. This was multiple choice, so people could choose multiple options if they decided to. But 38% of the answers believe that men face some sort of disadvantage over women, whether it was slightly or a lot more. 35% believe that men and women are equally social to each other, that neither one has a disadvantage over the other. Not to say that they don't have some sort of disadvantage in society, just that they are about equal to each other. And 27% believe that women are more disadvantaged than men. Now, let's jump over to the legal side. Now, this you can see is quite a bit different than the social. Legal, 78% believe that men are more disadvantaged than women in some way. 15% believe that men and women are about equal to each other legally, and only 7% believe that women are somehow more disadvantaged than men. So let's go ahead and discuss this. Now, the legality, I think, kind of speaks for itself. Legally, men are disadvantaged in the court system. Whether it comes to sentencing, it has been shown that men often receive longer sentences than women for the same crime. I think it's like a difference of 40%, but there are instances where, especially when it comes to rape, that women will often get a slap on the wrist versus men who will go away a long time for issues of rape. There is other countries in the world that are trying to pass laws that state that killing a woman is far more severe than killing a man. And they're calling it femicide. Basically, anything that's done to a woman is far worse than anything done to a man. And instead of focusing on homicide as a whole, it's like, wow, how can we really look at murder victims and say that women are far worse than men? But those laws are being passed, and I believe it's either in Colombia or Brazil. I'm not certain at the moment if Colombia is a separate country or not. My geography is horrible. Okay, so, but let's look at socially. Now, it looks like it's pretty even across the board. I mean, 38% that believe that men are more socially disadvantaged than women. 27% believe that women are more socially disadvantaged than men. And then there are 35% So this is kind of across the board, and it's kind of hard to decide this because feminists often cite that men have all of the all the advantages in society. Everywhere is a safe space for men, and women have to work hard to even get recognized socially. That men get paid more, and it's always a boys' club and all of that. But in truth, it might have been like that, 30 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. But today, it really isn't. Women do have a lot more advantages socially than men do because women are a protected class. Look at the number of scholarships that are specific by gender. It is very difficult for a male to get any sort of scholarship Hold on one moment. All right, I apologize for that. Still trying to get someone on right now. Okay, so socially, men have to make waves for women. Anytime there's a rape accusation made against a woman, they are definitely protected. It's actually very difficult to find out anything about the woman who's accused of rape unless she's already in court. But when a man is accused of rape, it's everywhere. Everyone knows about it. And his life is pretty much destroyed by the accusation of rape, even if he's found innocent later. His life is still destroyed. And feminists often cite that it's better that a guilty man goes to prison for rape because all men are rapists, or justice still needs to be done. There's very little concern for what happens to men in our society. They grow up, they go to the military, they work their ass off, and it doesn't. How can men really get ahead anymore? Everything is, being diverted to women. That all of these advantages that men supposedly had. So I definitely said that men were more disadvantaged than women, both socially and legally. So I definitely, although I do find it interesting that people feel that maybe men and women are equal to each other, or that women are slightly more disadvantaged than men. That's certainly the feminist narrative, that they believe that. But I'm not of the mind that it's all or nothing for me. I do see in some instances that women do have some disadvantages in society. And as an egalitarian, I do try to fight for those things. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on from here. So the next section, we're going to be talking about gender roles. So let me go ahead and scroll to that. So we got two things here. Who do you believe is treated poorer when they do not adhere to traditional gender roles? So this is kind of men are treated poor. 70% believe that men are treated poor when they do not adhere to traditional gender roles. 26% that state that men and women are treated equally poor. 2% believe that women are treated poorer, and 1% said neither are treated poor. So let's go ahead and focus on why would men be treated poorer if they do not adhere to traditional gender roles. Well, basically, men have to sacrifice themselves. That is what is required of them. That is the role that men have to serve. They are the breadwinners for their family. They have to work long, hard hours for that. Me, I don't fit into that role. One is because I never really had that great of a job to begin with. I was always doing customer support or tech support, and it's not really a breadwinning job. And I've always tried to get into a line of work that allowed me to do that, not because I wanted to take care of a family, but to try to have more out of life. But when a man has a family, he has to work very, very hard to try to get money, to try to give to his family so his family can be happy. He has to sacrifice his time with his family. If he doesn't do that, then he's encouraged to go into the military and die for his country or to serve his country in other ways. If a man goes into a military and then comes home, anything that he's done in the military makes him a monster in society. If he is somehow injured in the military, the government or the VA will try to do everything they can to not give him the treatment he needs. Now, we run a flip of women here. Women can decide whether or not they want to go into a job place or be a stay-at-home mom. Women are able to get on welfare a lot easier than men are. And in fact, the welfare system seems to be designed to be anti-male. It's not to say that men can't get on welfare. It's just harder for them to do so. So let's take a look at the second one. Do you believe that the backlash men receive for stepping out of the male gender roles can be attributed to misogyny? So basically, 26% said somewhat, and 68% said no. I don't think this is an issue of misogyny. And I'll tell you why. Because misogyny is the hatred of women. And men stepping out of gender roles is not because they hate women. It's, if anything, they love women. But they want more freedom for themselves. They don't want to be doing backbreaking work to try to please some woman and then for her to basically have all of the freedoms he can't just to make her happy and the family happy. Then for her to grow so unhappy with him that she decides to get a divorce and he has to give half of everything he earns to her. I mean, where's the incentive there? I love women. I work with women on a regular basis. But why do I want to get into a situation where my whole life is basically slavery to a system that is designed to work against me and to highly favor women? I would love to get married one day, but in all honesty, if that's what I have to look forward to, no thank you. And I would love to have children one day. But again, the system is going to be designed against me. So what is in it for me to be in a traditional gender role? I'd rather have the freedom to do what I want and not to have to give everything of myself to women who will only abuse that privilege. Now, not all women do, but enough of them do that it makes me worried about doing it. Hold on one second. Okay, so we're bringing someone in. Just give me one moment to get them in. All right, so we're bringing my good friend in, Rachel. I'll let her introduce herself. And we'll kind of go back a little bit, and I'll just let her respond to these when she gets in. So, yeah, there's nothing that compels me to get into a traditional gender role. But, the consequence is that women tend to look down on me for not being in a traditional gender role. Hello, Rachel.
Hello, Mad Catch. How are you?
I'm doing well. Do you see the screen okay?
Yes, I do. I actually see it quite fine.
Okay, so we're only on our second topic, so I'm going to go back and let Rachel respond to these real quick.
All right.
So the first thing we have, and I'm kind of doing these in clusters so we can kind of discuss them all at once. I won't really be giving my opinions on these, maybe a little snippets here and there, because I've already gone over what I think on all of these. So we have 420 respondents to this, about 6% more female than males. So we have a pretty good sample size of what's going on, what people think on these issues. So first is legal versus social. How socially disadvantaged do you believe men and women are? 38% believe that men were socially disadvantaged over women. 35% believe that men and women were about equal socially. And 27% believe that women were more disadvantaged than men. Now on to the second one, and I would love for you to respond to either one of these or both. How legally disadvantaged do you believe men are versus women? 78% believe that men are more legally disadvantaged than women, and 15% were kind of saying both are about equal to each other. What is your response to that?
Well, it's kind of an interesting thing. When we think about, how is the question worded in terms of socially disadvantaged? Are we talking about just the general societal attitude towards men in comparison to women, or is it just sorry,
if you look on your screen, that's just exactly how the question is.
Okay.
Worded. So,
well, I think it makes a little bit of sense to say that, and it's not necessarily anything malevolent. One of the things that women are typically good at, and one of the things that we're actually wired to do in terms of evolution, is to be good socially. Women have a tendency to be a little bit better about entering different spaces and kind of becoming one of the team and stuff like that. I think it might be an evolutionary something that we developed so that a woman could go from tribe to tribe. And that's just me speculating here, because usually what would happen would be, you'd need to add some genetic diversity, so you would have to go and leave your group and move to another family group. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, there was also the suggestion that someone made that one of the other things that women would have to do is be able to integrate them into a new society if they were captured as spoils of war, that you kill all the men, and then women would have to be easily able to move from one tribe to another.
So I think it would make sense to say that women are very socially adaptable. And I think that to some degree is inherent. And I think we're finding a lot more about that the more people look into the differences between men and women. But in terms of the general attitude towards men, I think because of that, because there are these differences between us, we have a tendency to, because right now society is favoring women's perspective of things a little more. So when they look upon male behavior and they misunderstand the way that the subtle differences between our communication styles, we have a tendency to attach this idea that there's ill intent on the part of the man, because they don't exactly understand how men communicate with one another and how they bond.
Well, let me throw something out at you, and you know that I highly respect you. But, one social disadvantage that we have between us is that when you speak, people are more willing to listen versus
Yes.
when I speak, because I'm a man and you're a woman. A woman has something of value to say in our society, where a man, not so much. So, how do you respond to that?
I would say that that's really a reality, and it's also kind of frustrating, to be perfectly honest. I know it sounds almost like someone being like a poor little rich girl to some extent, like, oh, you're frustrated that you've got, to some extent, I guess, what you could call female privilege. Well, yeah, because if you want to be valued by, on merit, on your hard work, it's difficult to know how much of what you've done is deserved and how much of it is there just because you're female. And so I would say that that is a reality. It's also frustrating, as I'm pretty sure it's frustrating for you to be on the opposite end of that, to find that people don't care as much about what you have to say because you're a man in the society that is valuing women's opinions over men's.
It definitely is frustrating, to be honest. But I try to it I can easily fall into that trap of saying, well, people just don't want to listen to me because I'm a man, and these people over here, these women easily get listened to. But I have to sometimes remind myself, you know what, these people over here deserve it. They do work
Yeah.
hard. But there are some women out there who rest on the laurels of they're female, they have tits, and
Mm.
people are going to listen to them. And that annoys me
Yeah.
so much.
And I think the more that I look into things where they talk about the subtle differences in communication styles between men and women, a lot of the problems, a lot of the things where people somehow attribute to toxic masculinity seems to really be this big misunderstanding among women. So they might get wronged by a specific guy or something in their life, and then they attribute it to all men. And they just, so anything that doesn't make sense to them in the way that men communicate or the way that they interact with others, and the moment a man tries to interact with a woman as they would a man, they of course take offense. So it's, they kind of have to learn to deal with your average woman with sort of kid gloves. And I think that right there is really frustrating. An effort on the part of men to try and learn how to interact with women, and not an effort on the part of women to learn how to interact with men.
Well, I definitely think that that happens in society, and it has happened for probably over 200 years, because it's always men that have to court women. Even in modern times, it's still suggested, strongly suggested, that a man pays for the first date or pays for any date, and the men have to, really go all out for women in order to possibly go to the next level, whether that's just the second date or sleeping with them or forming any sort of relationship. And there's less pressure for a woman to have to do anything. Now, there are women out there who do try to participate and pick up the slack a little bit, but there's no requirement for them to do so.
Yeah, and that's, if women are out there listening to this and they're wondering to themselves, how can I help my relationship track record? It's, you do just this one little thing. It's, look at the differences between men and women in terms of how we communicate, just some of the differences, and you'll be surprised at how much everything just seems to open up and make sense a lot more to you the moment you try to do that. The moment you try to understand what is just normal male behavior. because sometimes, being a woman and knowing how you interact with other women, and then if you try to then attribute that to the way men interact with one another, it's going to seem barbaric. And that's, I would say the same thing would apply if you swap the genders. You're like, oh God, if you looked at women and thinking about the way that you communicate with other guys, it's gonna seem like, oh God, this is whiny, and I don't want to endure this at all. But yeah. But in terms of how legally disadvantaged men are in relation to women, I think that it makes sense to suggest that they are legally disadvantaged. And I think the reason for this is and continues to be, it's that gap, that sentencing gap that people talk about. And I think the reason for that has a tendency to be because we do associate violent behavior with men more often than we do with women. But the truth of the matter is that men are not more violent than women. It's just, I think people notice their actions a lot more. And that might just happen to be something that is within us, is that we notice that a little bit more. Women have a tendency to be a little more covert with their malice and to be a little bit more secretive about it. And when we bring them into a court system and we have a woman against a man, like who do you think wins? Especially if it's a woman who's saying, this person abused me, this person is the worst person in the world, and you've got a lot of drama going on in the courtroom and they're arguing over who gets custody of children. I think it makes a lot of sense that someone will look over at the man and think, well, who do I think is more capable of lying here? And I think often they think it's going to be the man. Because again, it's this misinterpretation of what is healthy male behavior and what is somebody being a terrible person. And what things that are bad in society are really can we really attribute to being masculine or feminine?
One of the articles I have on the Honey Badger site is the diffusion of responsibility. Mm-hmm. And that's more for crowds and the public and all of that, but that can also be attributed to the justice system. Mm-hmm. And what we see in my article is I show a video of what would you do, and we see that these people are walking by a woman blatantly abusing a man. And in many of those cases, when asked, like, well, why didn't you do anything? And it's like, well, I thought that he must have deserved it.
Yeah,
and it's this general attitude that men are always the aggressors in any situation. So if a woman is abusing a man, the man must have done something to deserve it. Where if we flip it, a woman is always innocent. And she does nothing to warrant any sort of bad thing that happens to her.
Yeah. I actually was just talking about this very thing on a post. Usually I answer a lot of questions on my blog. And the question came up, like, I know you don't like the term toxic masculinity, but do you think that it's something that you can use to describe the behavior, the toxic behavior of someone who is hyper masculine or something like that? But ultimately, what it came down to is I said, whenever women engage in the behaviors that we're associating with being toxic masculinity, we don't call them toxic, we call them empowered. And it's disgusting. It really, really is, because people start making a whole bunch of excuses for their behavior. They'll say, oh, somebody else is to blame. It must have been someone else. She must have had a good reason for doing it, because women certainly don't ever have violent thoughts and don't ever engage in anything violent or hurt anyone, which is really a load of shit. Any girl who's been through high school knows that right there is a complete load of shit. They've met the mean girls. They've met these violent individuals. And they know that they exist in society. And that after they've done all of these terrible things, they'll wipe themselves off and put on a good face and then pretend like nothing ever happened. So it's really, really frustrating.
I'm going to stop you there because we'll get plenty of opportunities to speak, but I do need to move on.
Yeah, I guess we should move on.
Quick shout out to the people in the chat there. We got Panina saying, hi, Kat. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Panina.
And then Eric Martin, my chest feels like I'm going to have a heart attack when my wife bitches me into oblivion. I think it has shortened my life.
Poor thing. Really. I feel bad for that guy.
I already talked about this a little bit, so I'll go ahead and let you give your opinion on this. Let me load up my results. Okay, so gender roles. Who do you believe is treated poor when they do not adhere to traditional gender roles? 70% believe that men are treated poor. 26% believe that men and women are both equally treated poor when they do not adhere to traditional roles. The follow-up question for this: do you believe that the backlash men receive for stepping out of male gender roles can be attributed to misogyny? 67% or 68% said no. 26% said somewhat. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, I think that if I were to say that men specifically are treated more harshly, that would be a more biased standpoint. But I'm going to say that I think men and women are both treated pretty bad over it overall. And you'll find that the moment that you decide to differ from the norm, the moment that you're not womaning properly, who's going to be the one who's on your ass? Other women. It's not really the way people think. They think, well, if you're not womaning correctly, who's going to be the person who comes down on you? It's going to be men. No, it's other women. They'll be like, oh, you're not playing the game properly. You're fucking it up. And they will make your life a living hell. They will spread rumors about you. It's usually a little more covert. But when men step out and choose to do something different, I think the reaction is a lot more visible. It's a lot more tangible for people to see.
Okay, so let me ask you this question then. What do you think is defined as the gender role for women in our society? Is it the traditional idea, or has that been redefined by feminism?
Well, what people usually view as being the traditional gender role for women is really, really flawed, because I think it's been very much shaped by modern feminism, when people's idea of what it means to be traditionally feminine. Usually what you find when you go back in time and you look into history, that you find women, even though they may not have had things like the ability to vote, or they may not have been able to own property, they held a lot of social power. It's going back to what I was talking about before. They're very good at coming into a space, at adapting socially. And so it's very easy for them to then gain a lot of power in social fields, things like in the church, things like that. It may not have been an official position where you have a title attached, but it was something that they did. And you notice that pretty much in every part of human history, there was at least some woman who was involved in her community and stuff like that. So that is something that they aren't really latching onto and understanding as being a part of what women were like back then. And that's the thing that they leave out. They say, well, women were oppressed and women were subjugated and all this other bullshit, but they're not really getting to the nature of women and what things were expected of them. That was definitely part of it.
Well, and a good example of that would be prohibition, which was started by women because they were tired of their men going to the bar after work. So how were women able to influence a change of law when they had no power?
So I think more what is traditionally feminine is to be this sort of social butterfly, to gain influence and things like that through interactions with other people, and to sort of I guess play the game, as it were, to find the right husband, to make the right connections, things like that. I think that's a little more close to traditional feminine values of what you're supposed to do as a woman, rather than it being the person who just takes care of the kids and things like that. Because usually what you would do is you would do all of your work and you would get into your little bitching circle with all of the other women. and that was a regular thing. You didn't necessarily do all of this housework and stuff alone. You'd find this excuse to go to a spot where you're washing clothes or you're gathering water or something, and you're trading around gossip and things like that. I think that's closer to what it is. Whereas the role of men is considered to be, you sacrifice a lot. You sacrifice, I guess, your own desires for the greater good. You're expected to do that. You're expected to toss aside everything that you want because that's less important than everything else. At least that's the mindset.
Let me throw an idea out at you. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that one of the gender roles that men and women must engage in, or specifically women, is kind of this sisterhood that you must agree with what all other women say, and to not agree automatically with women, you're breaking the gender role as being a woman?
Yeah, actually, I would agree with that. And you also find this when you look at different species of primate. There's always the group of women. Getting into the inner circle of that sisterhood is crucial to being that part of the tribe, to being a part of the group. And if you don't integrate into the social pecking order, you're an outcast. You're not going to be able to procreate. You're not going to be able to find a mate. They will leave you on the outskirts, and you won't be accepted. So I think that is definitely a part of it.
And how do you respond to this second one, that the backlash that men receive for stepping out of the male gender role can be attributed to misogyny?
I think that's complete and utter horseshit. Well, I mean, the belief that the backlash men receive for stepping out of male gender roles. No, because these are roles that society imposes. It's not just men who reinforce these roles, it's also women who expect men to give up the things that they want so that everybody can live better. It's something deeply ingrained within us, and the moment you say, well, no, I don't think I want to do that, that sounds like a bad deal. People are asking whether or not they're really a man, or, oh, gee, are you gay or something? No, I don't think it can be really attributed to misogyny.
Okay, and Eric Martin from chat, when you were discussing about female gender roles, had said that he had never thought of it like that. So he inspired new thoughts, Rachel. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's go to our next section, and this will be on the patriarchy. So,
oh, the patriarchy.
So first off, we got 3 questions here, but I can only really view 2 at a time. Do you believe that society hates femininity even when expressed by a woman? As we can see from here, about 80% say no, 17% say somewhat. Next question. Do you believe that men actively created the patriarchy? 83% said no, 14% said somewhat. And our last question, do you believe that the patriarchy developed due to evolutionary reasons? 40% said no, 37% said somewhat, and 22% said yes.
Okay, so what was the first question again?
First question is, do you believe that society hates femininity?
No, I don't. And the reason why is you see this common theme even throughout literature of men just sort of willing to throw down everything that they have just to go save a woman or take care of a woman. I don't think that society overall hates women. In fact, I think they see it almost as femininity as this mystery that needs to be solved, as this thing that needs to be obtained or acquired. They're fascinated with it, and they want a piece. And it's not anything associated with someone objectifying you. It's just I think they're they like the idea of it because it's almost seen as are almost seen as a rare commodity, as this special thing. And so I don't think that we hate femininity. I think some people dislike specific kinds of women. But that's just me. And I think when you have people who are choosing to just step out of these roles, you see a little bit of backlash there. When you see men are choosing to express themselves, express their feelings in a way that women have asked that they do, which is the more typically feminine way of doing it, and just literally saying, I feel this and this is what I'm going through right now, people act negatively towards it because they see that as being specifically feminine. And it's just kind of confusing, to be honest. I don't think anyone really hates women. I think you can look in a whole bunch of different societies and find that is really just not the case. But you will always find men who are very specific, who specifically do not care about the rights and personal space of some women, and then people will then project the actions of those specific men onto everybody. And I think that comes closer to the way we humans interact and interpret certain situations.
Yeah, I've always loved that feminists especially will say that, well, not all feminists are like that, or those are not real feminists, but the moment they have a chance to say anything bad about a man, they'll give everyone that title. It's like, well, this man over here did something bad to me, so all men are to blame. And I'll be like, well, I didn't do that, or I've never done anything like that. And it's like, well, you're just being apologetic to men. And it's like, yeah, but you're also throwing all of us under the bus, but you hate it when I do that to you. So I do, but you're perfectly right. I don't hate femininity. I actually do like it. I also like women who are not feminine. I like women as a whole. I just hate women who want to try to be a victim all the time, who can only define themselves by me being the bad guy.
Yeah, and women haven't always been this way. Not all women specifically have been this way. I think what we're seeing is a change in our society that has come from us doing really, really well. There's a lot more food around. There's a lot more. So everybody overall is in a better place. And so there's room for people to start bitching and complaining about stuff that doesn't matter.
Which leads us into the patriarchy. So do you believe that men actively created the patriarchy, and or do you believe that the patriarchy developed due to evolutionary reasons?
Here's the thing. What people usually describe as being the patriarchy is a society where women are subjugated and live under, a man's thumb and shit like that. But really what it is that we expect men to take the more visible leadership position. Women expect that. Men expect that. But what's going on in the background is women are holding all of the social power. They are getting in there and they're going into different spaces and they're helping in different ways. And that's kind of why I think when we try and tackle the problem of gender inequality, if we look at it in terms of one gender and not look at it in terms of that we as a society have sort of evolved to be a species where we're different, men and women are different more because we fit different roles. We can't survive without each other. So where women are building the things socially, they're getting support for different causes and stuff, and they're really good at that. And men are there on the ground doing this more visible leadership role. They're doing a lot of the visible acting and making these more tricky moves where women are in the background sort of planning everything else on the home front or in social spheres. So I mean, when people are talking about patriarchy, they're talking about something that doesn't exist. They're talking about a system where the actions of men are being more visible, but the actions of women are still there, and people still recognize them as an important part of the society. I really think that is a myth.
I agree with you. I don't think the patriarchy has ever really existed. I mean, feminists will say that it's been around for all of human history, which I disagree with that concept, but it's never ever really existed in America. It's always been that, yeah, the thing that I often hear is, well, men always had the right to vote, women never did. Well, actually, that's not true. In New Jersey, women were able to vote in the 1700s. It ended 30 years later, but it did happen. But also for the fact that men have always been required to sacrifice everything for themselves for women. Why? And just because they somehow got more money meant they had more power? No, they didn't. But even going back to the voting issue, men were not guaranteed the right to vote, even if they served in the military. It always had to be landowners. And then after some time, men were given the ability to vote about the same time that women started receiving the ability to vote in different states, of course. It wasn't a national thing where men got the right to vote or women got the right to vote until the 1900s, but the same thing for men as well. When it was stated that if men had to serve in the military, they got the right to vote.
Yeah, and you did have, I think, at least one rich widow who had been voting, I think, as far back as, I think, the Revolutionary War. I could be mistaken on that one specifically, but I do know that there was a woman who was voting in her husband's stead who had enough land to be able to vote. Far before, I think, you had voting rights available in New Jersey for both sexes.
Yeah.
And
this
that's something I don't
whole
want to
idea, especially with the idea that this is supposed to favor men, but anytime we show evidence that men are not being supported, it is a function of the patriarchy. And it's like, well, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. It's a system designed to benefit men, but it also hurts men at the same time. Wow, that sounds like a really bad organization.
Yeah, they're really talking about this, and they're like, oh, this is something that only benefits men. Well, this is a system where every major visible responsibility is being thrust upon men. So it's not a system where women are having to really go out of their way to do anything, at least in terms of what we consider to be the traditional way. But really what's happened, really what you do have is men and women are both having their roles. They're both working, especially in the lower classes and things like that. But I think you will find that a lot of the lower class men, of course, couldn't vote either. And the people who decided to say, okay, well, I want voting rights, are the women who were rich enough to be educated and had enough room to start bitching about, oh, well, I can't vote like my husband or my male relatives.
And how about some of these interesting new policies that are going on that women in the New York Fire Department don't have to pass their physical courses to be a firefighter? Is that a function of this patriarchy?
No, it's just stupidity on these people's part. They are so obsessed with the idea that women have to be equal to men in ways that are visible to everybody, and until there's not a doubt in their mind that equality is taking place. But you can't force these things, especially when it's something that revolves around being physically capable to do a specific job. If you don't measure up and it's something where you have to save people, in a way, this is the way that feminism is directly going to be hurting people pretty soon. We're going to start seeing the fallout for this probably in the next 20 years on a massive scale, because people have decided to go out of their way to try and make women equal to men in ways that are visible. And yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on to our next section. Well, this one's kind of by itself.
Yeah.
Do you believe that women should be candidates for military drafts? 82% said yes. I agree with this.
Yeah, well, it depends on what role you're having. Are you being a ground soldier? The thing about it is I honestly think we need to abolish the draft, because what you're doing overall is you are bringing in people who may not be physically capable of doing a job, but you're bringing them into a war that they're not going to necessarily want to fight. And as a result, you're going to have people you're going to have less efficient soldiers overall. And I would rather have a small number of competent soldiers who know what the fuck they're doing than a whole bunch of people who are just scared out of their mind. So I don't think this specific thing has to do with gender. I think that it's something that we're going to see possibly abolished, because I think that they are going to have to decide pretty soon whether or not they're going to have women register for the draft. And because they've brought in a whole bunch of new policies in regards to how you're supposed to treat women, things like that, and whether or not women can be ground soldiers. So that decision is going to come up pretty soon. So if they decide that that's going to be a thing, you're probably going to see a backlash overall. It's gonna take women having to register for the draft for people to say, "Oh man, this is fucked up." But
one of the common complaints I get about this when I talk about the military draft, a lot of feminists will say, "Well, there hasn't been a draft in like 30 years," and it's like that's irrelevant. Because the thing about the draft is this is a part of selective service. Now, selective service is really not used for anything anymore, but once upon a time, it could be. That's, if there was a fire on your city block, a firefighter could go up to you and say, you need to help out with this fire. And that was what selective service basically was. Women got the right to vote without requiring to be part of selective service. And that was a great injustice that feminists have had over 100 years to fix that, to correct that, and they never did, because who wants the responsibility that comes with voting? Now, how this relates to voting is if you didn't sign up for selective service, you wouldn't register as a voter until you did. However, if you did not sign up for the selective service by the age of 25, you could potentially go to jail. And when you go to jail for anything, you lose the right to vote.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, we should abolish selective service as a whole, because this can prevent people from getting college loans, or prevent men from getting college loans. It can prevent them from getting government work. We should abolish it altogether. But if men are required to be on it, then women need to be on it, because that is equality.
I absolutely agree. You see this in other countries where they'll have you, part of being a citizen is that you have to serve in the military for like 1 or 2 years. And that's just something that is generally expected of you, man or woman. And if that's something that they're going to enforce over here, then yeah, I think women should be added. It's unfortunate that might be a thing overall, and that it continues to be a thing. That disturbs me even now, that we still have that there. They're like, oh, well, we haven't done that in forever. Doesn't matter. That doesn't take away what happened to all of these young men who had to go off and fight wars that they weren't 100% with, they weren't okay with, and who died face down in the dirt. And came back serious problems. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and move on from here, but there was a question from the chat from Eric Martin. Okay. He says, do you have a theory of where patriarchy came from? I'm going to go ahead and start this real quick, but I know Rachel will want to say something on this. As far as patriarchy, whoa, I muted myself there.
Yes.
Where patriarchy really came from is basically around the 70s. Now, I'm sure it came before that, but where we really started to hear about it was more in the rise of the second wave feminists. So about the 60s and 70s. And it was just a way of having a boogeyman to say that, you know, there's this thing that is systematically trying to keep women down.
Mhm.
And that is this thing over here that all men seem to be a part of. And it was a way to put a line in the sand and say, if you support us, you're against the patriarchy. But if you don't support us, you're part of the problem. And they just needed a name to give to it. So I think that's really where the modern concept of patriarchy came from, was just as a way to fuel the fire that was second wave feminism.
And it's also really fueled by a lot of ignorance surrounding the way that we have developed as a species. It really is. Overall, what we would find is, you know, when we were at least living out of caves and stuff, what would happen would be that the men would go off to hunt and bring back a kill, and the women would stay behind, and at least the sickly men would stay behind and manage things on the home front. And you saw similar situations when we moved over to a more agricultural society, is that, you know, men would have to be handling these things, and they had a position of respect within society because of their sacrifice. They were admired for the sacrifice that they went through, all the things that they did for the greater good of everyone, sacrificing their bodies and their, you know, their strength, everything for everyone. So I don't, if that is a patriarchal society that keeps women down, specifically by the men breaking themselves for everyone, I don't know. It's just really stupid to me. These people don't understand what has been really going on. They don't know. These are kinds of people who have never really had to suffer or give up anything. So the idea that you have a society where people just their bodies become broken early on in their adult life, and then they're unable to continue on. They have to be then cared for by other people, and they eventually just kind of die of their of a lack of health and things like that before they reach the age of 50. That's entirely foreign to them. They don't understand it. But that's how things went. I don't know if you would call that a patriarchal, oppressive society where men are just dropping like flies.
Honestly, no, it's not a patriarchal. Well, to the way that Allison has described it, if that would be a patriarchal society, that, yeah, men do rule it, but they also have to sacrifice themselves in the benefit of women. So by that definition, then yes, that is the definition of a patriarchal society, which means that a matriarchal society would have to be pretty much the exact opposite, that, yeah, women are in power, but they're also sacrificing themselves for the benefit of men.
Actually, here's an interesting thing, at least when you look at bonobo chimpanzees and the way that their society works. And this is something that I've noticed when I think about it. It can only really survive in the fucking Congo, where they have no natural enemies. When there's nobody at the top of the food chain to take you out, that kind of society can, of course, work. But just outside, if they were to try and exist the way that they're existing, where everything is based on sexual currency, they would just completely die off as a species. And that's why they're so endangered. They can only exist in this thick forest where they have no natural. And for those of you who don't know, bonobo chimpanzees are a matriarchal society where it's governed by this all-powerful sisterhood, and they build this. They build the strength of the female group by having sex with one another and placating the men. Placating. I can't remember. Anyway, with sexual favors. If a male is aggressive or are becoming unruly, they're like, "Here, fuck me." And the only way that society can be sustainable is if you're there without any kind of natural predators, and there's nobody you have to deal with. There aren't that many other groups that you have to deal with. That's the only way it survives. If there were more bonobo chimpanzee groups where they were constantly at battle, that wouldn't they'd fuck each other up. It would all fall apart. But it only survives when you have nothing else to deal with.
Okay, so let's go ahead and go to our next section, which I call hatred. Do you hate women? 98.8% of the people say no, they don't. Do you believe men are better than women? Well, 97% say no. Do you believe that women are better than men? 99% say no. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't really hate anyone, to be honest. Or if I do hate people, it's a very small number. And it's because it's a very strong emotion. It's a lot that you have to put into disliking people. It's far too much energy, I think, to exert on people that you dislike. It's a very strong emotion. So I know I don't hate women, and I don't believe that men are better than women, but I think in some ways I favor their company a little more, and it's because it's just a personal preference. And the reason is because sometimes they have a tendency to choose conversations that are relevant. Whereas whenever I'm conversing with women who aren't the Badgers, I end up getting drawn into whatever is going on in their lives and the drama surrounding their life. So it's easier to get into the kind of intellectual discussion that I want to with other men. Sorry, not other men. With men. Sorry, I'm not a man. With men, than it is for me to engage in conversations with women. With the exception of the Badgers, because they don't always bring their personal lives as much into it. It's been an interesting interaction with them, specifically considering that they don't do that. So I think that's why we get along so well. But I don't believe men are better than women. It's just a personal preference when I want to discuss specific things.
I'll definitely agree with you with conversations with the Badgers. It's both enlightening and also very, very silly.
Yes.
We get into some interesting conversations
that
are like, if feminists could see this, they would just be like, their heads would explode.
Yeah. It's like, do you believe women are better than men? No. I think that men and women are good at specific things. I think that they have some inherent abilities and attributes that they are specifically good at and are really great at. They do it really well. And so I don't think that either is really better than the other. I think we both need men and women to have a healthy society. I think that if we understand what those things are, we're better suited to have these discussions about gender. And that's the real problem that we have with feminists overall, is they're having the discussions, but the way that they're framing it, they're not considering gender differences. They come from the perspective that gender is a social construct, that it is something that we make up, that there isn't a biological aspect to it, and that the biology doesn't play into our interactions with one another, that there aren't social differences in the way that we interact. And so, of course, when they see something that offends them, they attribute specific negative qualities to being a man, instead of understanding that masculinity presents itself differently from man to man. It's different with different men. So the way a man might express his masculinity is going to differ depending on the man. Same thing with femininity. And so it's just it's a really fucked up way to try and discuss gender when you take biology off the table and you assume that this is something that we have constructed as a society.
For me, I don't hate anyone. There's a lot of people that I really, really, really dislike and disrespect. I have no respect for them whatsoever. But it's a little bit hard for me to just outright hate someone, but there are some people out there. But men and women are not better than each other. There is nothing. Now, they might be advantage over each other or have some sort of privilege over each other.
Yes.
Mostly women have those privileges and advantages. But when it really comes right down to it, anything a man can do reasonably, a woman can do, and vice versa. There might be some things like strength. Technically, a woman could do these things if she set herself out to do them. But in a general sense, they can do what each other can do. There are no real differences between them.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, I think this lack of appreciation for men, and just masculinity overall, has come from what has happened to our society because of the way that we have started structuring things. We have made it so that the provider is now the government. Government is daddy. Government is now forming the role that men have traditionally filled, and what usually would give them respect, make them respected members of society. And because of that, and because of this attributing malice to this misunderstanding of what is masculine and what makes a man and how men interact, it is kind of just brewing this hatred of men in our society, this belief that specific things are masculine, these specific negative things in our society are masculine qualities. And so there's just this deep hatred and this favoring of the female way of interacting and dealing with problems, which isn't always good, especially when you need to accomplish a goal very quickly and you need to take a very sudden, aggressive action to accomplish it. Women have a tendency to want to plan and be a little bit more covert in how they handle problems, be a little bit on the sneaky end. Whereas men, if something needs to be done, they're more likely to do it in a visible way and take risks and take chances and things like that. That is at least traditionally what is associated with masculinity.
Okay, so very good things you've said there. Let's go ahead and move on to the next part, where I define this as misandry versus misogyny. So we got three main points here. First is going to be, do you believe misandry exists?
Yes.
Now we got individual and institutional level.
Yeah.
33% believe that it's on an individual level. Basically 0% believe that it's on an institutional level. 65% believe that it's both individual and institutional level. And also the next question here, do you believe misogyny exists? 42% on an individual level, 55% on both individual and institutional level. And let's take a look at our final question in this section of how prevalent do you believe misandry and misogyny exists? 31% believe that misogyny is more prevalent than misandry. 50% believe that both are equally prevalent. 38% believe misandry is more prevalent than misogyny. And I can hear Rachel wanting to speak on this, so you have at it.
Oh gosh, I do believe that there are specifically people who dislike women. I do think that misogyny is a thing. I don't think it is institutional, though. I think that often people attribute specific people's actions as being the whole of society in regards to women. I think most people really like women and they consider them to be these sought after beings, or they're almost goddesses on a pedestal in many situations, rather than, but some people I guess would call that misogyny. I think I'm trying to remember what it was, but it's benevolent sexism is what they call it. But instead of considering it to be something where they revere a woman for specific traits. But I don't think it really exists on an institutional level. I think usually a lot of the malice or a lot of the the sexism that was attributed in the past was really due to the way that we valued men and women. Like, women weren't typically as educated, especially in the lower classes, as men were. You were more likely to educate your male children because they would be more likely to then go off and have a job and then be able to care for the family as a whole as the parents would age. And so they would put all of their resources into educating their male children overall, because the idea would be that they would then take care of them as they got older. And so we attributed like being a complete idiot to being a woman. So a woman speaking about just needless things all of the time and not really having any understanding of the world was something that happened as a result of, you were less likely to educate your daughters if you weren't rich. But as you see, but higher up in the classes, high class women were typically educated on some level, so they weren't nearly as ignorant. But that's something that has gone away as we have educated women a lot more now, especially within the first world. So I don't think that there is just this inherent sexism against women, but there is a lot of sexism going on against men because we're valuing the female way of doing things a lot more now, because people have just spread this idea that we have oppressed women for generations, and that has become systematic. It's something that is just generally accepted by everyone without question. So I do think that there is this bias against men that really comes from this fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be male and what it means to be masculine.
Well, when I see things like misandry existing in this world, and it definitely does, and it's a lot more prevalent than misogyny, and I will acknowledge that misogyny once upon a time was fairly prevalent. This idea that women, invading into men's space, but it doesn't exist anymore, or it's not as prevalent. Maybe there are pockets of where it does exist, and I'm willing to acknowledge it. But it seems that this quest for equality that feminists have is not a need for equality. It's, hey, you did this to my, grandmother and great-great-grandmother, so now it's your turn to receive it, even though you yourself did not do it.
It's a very biblical way of thinking.
It is what I really see nowadays from the feminist movement of, well, it's now your turn to experience it, and that's the only way we can have equality is if now you're the bitch.
Yeah, like I said, it's this very almost biblical kind of curse where if you did something way back when, you're therefore cursed, and your children and your children's children and their children are all therefore cursed. And they have to live with the guilt of the actions of the few. And the way how we can just look at that in our society and be fine with that very archaic way of thinking about people and interactions is, I feel like the planet has gone mad, really, when I look at that. Is that you're cursed because of the actions that your ancestors may or may not have engaged in. You're a pariah because they were a pariah and they did something wrong. It's don't know how that makes any sense.
It's basically like revenge and vigilantism,
yes,
which honestly, a need of revenge is not going to resolve anything. It's not going to give you what you want. I mean, there are many times within this community that someone does something that pisses me off, and I'll be honest, I can be petty at times where I just want to like scream at them, and I want them to know how I feel, and I stop myself.
Yeah,
the reason being is that nothing is good is going to come from that. Nothing is going to be resolved. All that's going to do is create more drama. And I've got to learn to just let it go and, try to talk in a constructive way. If they've done something that, I feel hinders our relationship in some way, I will try to be like, hey, you know, when you did this to me, it really pissed me off. I'm not angry anymore. I just don't want to see it happen again. And I think that feminists as a whole could take a page from that and stop holding men to this standard of what might have happened so long ago and just say, you know what? We need to be equal to each other. What can we do to accomplish that? Instead, it's, I feel so oppressed by what you're doing to me, and I won't be happy until I get every single thing I want, even things I don't know I want.
Yeah. It's very human to have these sort of these feelings of anger just brewing inside of you and needing to know what to do with it. And I think if we step back and we understand that these are very human feelings and that they are okay, but that we then need to think about what is the best way to handle those feelings, I think that puts you in a better perspective. Because I've had these conversations with people before. They're like, I'm just so angry and I don't know what to do with myself. That's a common thing that has been mentioned to me. They say, I don't know what to do. How do I get over these feelings? And I think it's a better thing to say is, you know, it's okay to feel that way overall, but I think what needs to happen after that is to consider whether or not, like you said, the actions that you're taking, the way that you're dealing with it, whether or not that's actually helping overall. At least that helps me. I know that everybody is different, but that's the way I kind of deal with these things. I do get upset seeing the way that things are in this world sometimes, and I do get angry and pissed off and everything, but then I just kind of do this pause and I think about this and I'm like, oh, okay, you know, maybe I need to deal with this in a different way. Maybe I need to deal with this in a more constructive manner. But that's just the way I do things.
Okay, so we're both in agreement that misandry is a lot more of a problem than
definitely. And I think it's more of a new thing right now. I don't think that there's always been a hatred of men. I don't think that's something that's always been there, at least as prevalent as it is. I think there have probably been people who have specifically hated men, but I don't think it has been nearly this bad.
Yeah, I can definitely see a reason in that, but we're going to go ahead and move on. We do have Sarah Femme from chat saying, ooh, I hear a badger. Well, technically we're both badgers, so...
The badgers.
All right, so we've got two more topics to talk about, but this next one is going to be a little bit long. There's quite a few questions to ask on this, but I think it's a very important question, and I think Rachel will be the best person to answer it, but I'll certainly give my viewpoints on it. Starting off, do you think that there are people who support men's rights who are extreme, radical, or harmful? Now, the key thing here is... people who, you know, not everyone, just certain individuals that would rank as extreme, radical, or harmful. And I agree with this, that 68% say yes, 18% say maybe. If you answer yes to the question above, and let me go through these real quick, Rachel, just go ahead and jot down any notes you have. If you do answer yes, do you address these people? Now, 24% say yes, 54% say maybe, 21% say no. If you answer yes to the above question, where do you see these people most often? And a vast majority see them online. How prevalent do you think men's right radicals are? Now, about 70% say that they're pretty rare, either moderately rare or very rare. And only about 25% say that they're moderately prevalent. And I do agree that men's radicals are fairly rare. Do you find radicals to be an important issue that needs to be addressed as an advocate for men's rights? And about 70% say yes, 23% say somewhat. I agree that this does need to be addressed. And I
Yeah,
think
I
one
think
of the
so
great
too.
things about men's rights is that we do police our own a lot better than feminists do.
Yes.
We're almost
Um,
done with this. Do you see the others? Do you see others supporters of men's rights calling out radicals? About 53% say, yeah, they do see others calling them out. 33 somewhat. Okay, so yeah, we're done there. So go at it, Rachel.
oh God, there's this is kind of a big issue, and I think it's something I've wanted to speak out about, but I didn't know where the best platform was to speak about it. I do believe there are definitely some radicals out there, and I think that they are a reality. And some would say no, that they simply don't believe that they exist, and because they're like, oh well, we would have kicked them out already. Well, the way that the men's rights movement exists, and I think this is something that needs to be understood to really understand what I'm going to say, is that most people, I think, see it as this large, big group, when really it is, I think, a little more small pockets of individuals that sort of form smaller groups on the ground, and they do what makes sense to them as a form of activism. And I think the people who aren't really engaged in the kind of real life activism are a little more prone to finding themselves in communities where people who have been hurt, who have, I think, the reverse of what I was talking about, where women will have a bad experience with men and then attribute it to all men. The same thing applies to men in the situation to women. They will have experienced a really bad situation with a woman or some women and then attribute it to all women. And they will attribute specific attributes to women, specific negative attributes to women overall, and believe that those things are inherent in all women. And when you get to that point, that is where you can't really be differentiated from a feminist, because they really make those exact same arguments about men. They will say that masculinity, these specific things are masculine and those things are toxic. And I think to ignore that these people exist is really going to do a disservice to the movement overall. And this is just my personal opinion. I don't think that they are nearly as prevalent as feminists would like to believe, though. I don't think, I think that they would probably be on the rare end. And the reason for that would be is because I think a lot of them exists in smaller groups. And sometimes it's just they might exist in something like YouTube comments or in just in some forums. And but I really do think it should be addressed. And when you do see it, you should speak out on it. And when I see somebody who is making these arguments or doing something like assuming that a woman to be a liar, just straight off, instead of assuming a neutral position, which is what you should do when you are being skeptical. When you're going through critical thinking, the position to take is that you take this neutral position until somebody has proven otherwise. Until they have presented evidence to sway you in either direction, the position to be is this position of neutrality where you don't know. And that is how you should be skeptical about these things, is to assume that position of neutrality. And sometimes I will find that people take this other more extreme position that a woman is assumed to be a liar until she proves otherwise, because of that distrust. And yes, I might get a bunch of shit later on my Tumblr for saying that, but I think it's a reality. And the problem with this is that when women are like this in feminism, they get a pass. They say, well, she must have experienced something really, really bad to hate men, so we're going to give her a pass, and that's okay. And, we'll just understand, like, that this girl over here, we'll whisper in the shadows and say, like, oh, she's got a real problem, but we're not going to address it. But when a man has those feelings, we automatically get really aggressive towards them. And so when I find that a guy has these beliefs and stuff, I try not to come really aggressive at him. I try to see where he is, if I can actually explain that, this position is a little, that it's fine to have your own opinions, but that this position isn't necessarily a logical position. I'll try to weigh that, and if I find that I can't sway them, I'll call them on it. I'll say, listen, this right here is not a rational position to have if you want to call yourself a rational human being, someone who is a critical thinker. This is definitely based more in belief than it is in reality. It's more based in emotion. And I don't know, I probably got way off track. But I think addressing our radicals is going to be, it's going to be very important to moving forward. Because the way that the movement has been is that you have some people who are engaging in on-the-ground activism, and then you have other people who are more the keyboard warriors, who engage in what makes sense to them, which is to, make waves, as many waves as humanly possible, to draw attention to the movement and the belief that there is no such thing as negative PR and such and so forth. And then you have people who go out of their way to offend people in order to do the exact thing from before. There are a bunch of different people from different positions, but I think you have a lot of people, I think the majority of people in the movement are more egalitarian in nature. And they come at this from the perspective of that it makes sense. Like, even if the feminist argument was to be correct, the feminist argument that, oh, this happens at a lower rate, I think that that's not an excuse to deny men the kind of services that you give to women overall, in terms of mental health, in terms of just general respect and the way that we treat women. I think that it's incredibly unwise to then say that it's fine to treat men like shit just because that happens at a lower rate. That it's fine to just write that off and not treat these issues, even if they were correct. And I'm just saying that right now because I do think that it happens more often than they think. But even if they were correct, that's a complete bullshit argument.
Okay, so my stance on this, and that was very good, Rachel. By the way, Sarah Lefemme says that you're going to get shit on Tumblr no matter what you do. So.
Yes, that's true. Well, that comes with the territory. Whenever you camp out in Tumblr, you're going to get shit. Yeah. They're going to leave it on your front door.
So my perspective on all of this is, yeah, there are extremists in the men's rights. But the thing is, and this is one thing that I really respected about the Honey Badgers when I first joined them, is that, if someone is acting out of turn, if they're not, if they're really a destructive person, they will seek them out and, try to understand first and foremost where they're coming from and see, if this is a person that can be helped in some way. But if they just want to be like destructive 100% of the time and not want to do anything to really help anyone, they'd be like, hey, there's the door.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I really like about the Honey Badgers, as well as others within the men's rights movement. But the thing is, here's something that's happened to me recently, and I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. When I first came out as being Chris Vody and being Mad Cat at the same time, that I no longer, hid both of those personalities from each other, that I was both a writer and a men's rights activist, or not activist, but part of the men's rights movement, because I'm an egalitarian. One of the first, well, actually, it's only happened once so far, but someone that I had known in my writing life for over a year criticized me because I was making posts to Gamergate about my world building series. And she said, well, I've gotten a lot of harassment from Gamergate. And I said, well, I've gotten a lot of positive support from Gamergate. But she started to call me a misogynist, saying that I hated women. I'm like, why are you saying that? I've never said anything to that effect. And her response was, well, it's because I told you that I got harassed by Gamergate and you didn't come and say, you didn't try to help me with that. And the only reason why I didn't respond to her saying anything about the people who harassed her was because I was also that very day, like an hour away from doing the Hope for Cytheria event, where I had Mercedes on and I had over 20 people come on to the video, and I had to organize all of that. My mind was distracted on that. However, had it not been, I would have demanded that she tell me which people harassed her. So I could find out for myself. I could get their side of the story and find out. And the thing is, where we really differentiate between the feminists is that the newest wave of feminism, whether it's the third wave or the fourth wave, whatever, but pretty much starting with the third wave, they're all radicals, in my opinion. The ones that are considered to be the radicals are the actual feminists, because they're the ones actually doing something in the name of feminism. But then the second half of that is what I call the passive feminists, who do outnumber the actual feminists. But they, to me, are really the radicals, because all they do is stick their head into the sand and say, well, those people over there are not actually feminists, but we won't ever speak out against them. We won't ever police ourselves. The only time that we police anything is women against feminists, women against feminism, the anti-feminists. And we'll go on there and it's like, I don't understand why women are against rights or equality, or spit on all the things that feminism has done for them. And they don't want to try to understand anything. They rather just be secure in their position of saying, well, you know what? If they don't want to be a part of us, we're just going to automatically hate them. And that's not a way to do anything. But in many ways, the third wave of feminism is just radical feminism. There are feminists I do support, like Christina Hoff Sommers, and even Kathy Young on occasion. I support what she says, because they actually do care about equality between men and women, and are not just trying to make themselves superior and try to say, well, if you're not a feminist, you're a horrible, horrible person. But this horrible, horrible person over here is okay because she says she's a feminist. I don't agree with her, but I'm not going to call her out. And to me, that's radicalism.
And I think
Us in the men's right movement, we do police ourselves. And if someone needs help, we'll help them. And if someone is being destructive, we will push them out.
Yeah, I think that it's the interesting thing to think about is I really respect genuine women's advocates, and let me explain myself here. I think that what people usually see as women's advocacy is what people usually associate with feminism. They assume that every feminist is by definition a real woman's advocate, and by that I mean somebody who's actively advocating for women's rights. But they take this default position by saying that, the mere act of adding the feminist label makes them a real woman's advocate, when in reality it only takes somebody disagreeing with them for them to say, well, I no longer advocate for you. You're not the kind of woman that I'm interested in speaking for. But I think genuine women's advocates, they speak on behalf of women, and they support the rights of women regardless of what their beliefs might be. I think they try and consider what is good for a variety of women, and they don't just look at somebody's specific beliefs and say, well, you don't matter because you're conservative or you're religious or these variety of other things. They try and consider what might be good for a variety of women, and just making it open for women to have a choice, be able to make specific decisions, instead of saying, well, I'm only interested in helping this one kind of woman. And like women like Ayaan Hirsi Ali and people like that, and Christina Hoff Sommers, I think they have this mindset of that women should have certain choices available to them, and anything beyond that is just kind of special treatment. And I think that's probably a better position to take, because when you decide what's right for all women instead of asking them individually, when really what you're doing is you're saying, you're talking about specific women, like far left women, women of the far liberal left. That's not really talking about the majority of women who are even in the United States and even what's good for them. You're talking about people who probably have a lot more money and probably are interested in really stupid shit like fat shaming. And a lot of these non-issues that are first world problems. It's, I don't know. Those are the kinds of women that I really respect, are women who really look at the big picture instead of their own politics.
Yeah, I agree with you. Those are the women advocates, or, people like Christina Hoff Sommers, who don't just divide things in a category of, well, men are over here, women are over here, but looks at the bigger picture and it's like, there's a problem here. How do we fix it? And she will advocate things that are for men. She will advocate things that are just for women, and still calls herself a feminist. I don't think that she really should call herself a feminist anymore, but I respect her highly. And I also disagree with her many times. But I'm okay with that. I don't need to be around people that always agree with me. I want to be around people who constantly disagree with me. I mean, I talk to MGTOWs on a regular basis, and for the most part, I disagree with a lot of their views. But I like to be challenged. But it feels like within feminism, there is no challenging allowed. Either you agree with everything a woman says or you don't. And I'm sorry, but that is a radical viewpoint. And that's why I respect with what the men's rights movement does and the men's right advocates do, because they want to be disagreed with. They accept it because it makes them better in the long run.
Yeah, and the thing I really love about the men's movement overall, and this is something that I think you only get to see when you're actively involved with people who are a part of the movement, and you get to talk to them on a regular basis. I don't know if everybody gets to do that, but one of the things that I notice is that most of them, I think, have this understanding that, we come from these different backgrounds, and we need to make shit work. We need to be able to interact like adults and be fine with disagreeing, because on things that aren't related to men's rights. Because if we make a big fuss about things like politics, we're never going to get things to work, because this is really not a political thing. I think people on the right and people on the left each present different problems when it comes to men and the ideas of what the role of men should be in society. And so men's rights activists are kind of placed in the middle, because we understand that neither end of the spectrum is really helping or actively engaging with us in ways that are going to be helpful, because each of them use us in different ways. They use the left uses us to demonize men, to say, look, this is a hate group of men that is cropped up, that is built up on the internet, and look at the way that they think about women, and they're rape apologists, and they're the worst kinds of people in the world. And so they use us as a scapegoat on the left, and on the right, they use us to get back at feminists and to try and promote a traditionalist agenda, and to try and get us to go back to at least what they deem as traditional gender roles. So it's kind of a weird position. So you have this understanding that you have to be fine with these differences on some level and be able to deal with your interactions with people in order to try and help people on the ground. And that's what needs to happen. But often people don't have a problem with having disagreements and being able to respectfully disagree with one another. And they're unyielding. They don't want to give any ground to another person and say, I respect your opinion, even though I think it's wrong, and here's why. They can't do that. And so there are these falling outs in the men's movement that I don't think really need to happen. I think it's fine to have a bunch of different perspectives on what might help men. And I think that those things existing is helpful because it challenges people to be able to ask themselves what they personally believe about these issues. And the mere existing of these different perspectives really helps people to decide for themselves what they think is best for them.
All right, so we're going to go on to our last point for the day. I do want to respond to what's being said in chat between Sarah LaFemme and Eric Martin. Yes, I'm very distracted by Mercedes, even with her clothes on. So, all right. So I'm going to throw out the final. Go ahead, Rachel.
She does have a magnificent ass, I'm going to say. And I think she would like that I said that.
Oh, I'm certain she would. Of course, you know, I call her all sorts of things, and she loves it. You know, if you ever get a chance, just call her a bitchy boss or bitchy bossy. She'll love it. She'll love you for it. And if you want, throw cunt in there. She loves that too. All right.
She likes it when you talk dirty to her.
All right. So I want to ask a question to Rachel. I'm going to ask a question, and then I'm going to read the results. And then I want you to go ahead and either address one of the things or say something that you don't think is on there. I'm also going to ask the chat room that if you want to address one of these points, go ahead and I'll try to read it. So the question, the final question of the day is, what do you think is the most inaccurate myth surrounding men's rights? So let me go ahead and read through these, and then Rachel and people in the chat room, go ahead and give your answer, and we'll go ahead and try to address them. So I'm not going to read these in the order of the most to the least. I'm just going to read them down. That men have all the things they need.
The right
that
thing.
Men's rights take away from women's rights. That men's rights are oppressive. That only men support men's rights. That men who support men's rights hate women. That men who support men's rights are selfish. That men who support men's rights just want to batter women. That men who support men's rights are insult. And then there's other. So
there's so many here that I would say
on that, Rachel.
There's so many that I would say that are just so much of a big problem. Like, I mean, for example, I think that one of the ones that is most harmful to the movement overall, at least in terms of public perspective, is the belief that men's rights advocates are just really want to be apologists for men who engage in really bad behaviors. Things like, well, I would say it's more than bad behaviors. I would say that it's engaging in crimes, whether it is domestic violence or the rape of women or just being abusive overall. There are specific people who are like that. And I think that they believe that what we're interested in doing is explaining away the actions of those specific people. And I think overall that is really inaccurate. They take a lot of things out of context, and I think people get really, really frustrated about the overall opinions of men's rights activists, and then they will write things just to piss off feminists, and then people will say, "Here, look at this right here. I'm holding it up. This is proof that they're just rape apologists, and they just want to excuse the behavior of specific men." And they always bring that up in a conversation. They're like, "This is why you're toxic, and you're not calling it out, and you're not saying that this is bad." Well, if they're being satirical and they're just trying to piss you off on purpose, then they succeeded. I don't know if that specifically is toxic overall, that this is directly leading to women being hurt physically. But, you know, I will say that, you know, maybe it doesn't help us in terms of public opinion, but I'm going to say fuck public opinion, because even when we're given equal ground to speak, these people who write stories about us, who want to study the men's movement as an outsider, often have their own opinions coming in. And they will write what they're going to write regardless of whether or not we end up being the terrible monsters that they imagine in their minds. But there's also some other ones right here, that men have all the rights they need. No, they don't. It's right now, women have more rights than men in certain spheres, especially when it comes to things like custody, and the general opinion that men are more violent than women, or that the violence of men is more meaningful than that of women. And so we need to punish them more harshly than women. And that it's fine to just release violent women out into society because their violence simply doesn't mean as much overall because they're perceived to be weak. When there are women who, they'll cut a bitch. They will fuck people up. There are some women who are crazy, batshit crazy and violent. And they continue to hurt people when they get out of jail after their very, very short sentences. And that's really, I think, a problem, is that people say, well, men have privilege, men have all of this power, and therefore, anytime they have a problem, that's just, it's almost like, oh my gosh, poor little privileged guy, you're dealing with all of these problems, how dare you? It's like, you simply aren't aware of your privilege, and you're speaking from this privileged perspective, and your problems just aren't nearly as important as our own. It's complete bullshit. Even if men were privileged in some regard, they still have problems. And to ignore them and to downplay their issues is pretty fucked up. It's pretty fucked up to say that your feelings don't matter because you might have been born rich, or you might have been born with certain advantages. It's pretty fucked up to say that. I mean, that you are inherently bad because of all of these things. And these people are excusing, they're excusing their behaviors. They are creating socially acceptable bigotry. And I think that is probably the most harmful aspect. So I guess these guys are right when they're saying things like that men have all the rights they need. And also that men's rights take away from women's rights. No, it doesn't. No, they don't.
I've encountered this many times in my life where I start trying to talk about some of the problems that I have in life, and people, it's almost like a competition.
Yeah.
That somehow their life is so much worse. So I don't have a right to feel as I do. It's like, oh, well, I have to deal with this, and this. So you don't have a right to feel bad. You should feel lucky. And I'm like, no, that's not what it is. Yeah, maybe you have that to deal with, but that doesn't take away from how I'm feeling. It doesn't take away from what I'm dealing with. But I think one of the biggest myths, and all of these are very good, but I think the biggest myth to me is that men have as many privileges as they do. And I don't think that men really have that many privileges. Maybe once upon a time they did, but nowadays, no. Women have so much more privileges. I mean, the fact that the education system is being built around women, that if a man acts up in any way, he's more likely to be put on drugs or expelled from school than if a woman acts up.
Yeah.
Or the fact that women are more likely to graduate college now than men. Or the fact that if a man is accused of rape, his entire life will be destroyed even if he's found to have been innocent of the crime. Or the fact that, if a man needs help, he's not going to get help. Or he's really going to need to have some really good friends to get any sort of help. Or if a man is abused in any way, he has nowhere to go and will be more likely to be arrested for someone hurting him. If a woman hurts him, then the woman getting arrested for actually abusing the man. And that no one is going to respect him if he has to ask for help.
Yeah.
Men really don't have that many privileges. And to suggest that they have more than women is laughable.
Yeah.
And I think Go ahead.
Well, the male position of power, at least historically speaking, was one that was of merit. You had to make some kind of great sacrifice to gain a position of power. You had to make sacrifices. You had to engage. You had to do certain things to gain that position of respect. Otherwise, people didn't really they didn't just automatically respect you as a man. You weren't automatically given the keys to the castle. You had to prove yourself. And right now, women hold a lot of power in society, and they're holding the keys to the castle without having done anything.
I mean, the greatest achievement that I've seen a feminist commit lately to get the respect, not that she deserves it, by the way, is to carry a mattress and lie about rape. Hell, women who lie about rape are treated better than women who don't lie about rape. Or you're like, oh, well, she's pointing out a problem in society. I'm like, no, she's lying and you're celebrating her for it. That's fucking privilege.
I will say one thing. They are pointing at a problem in society, and that's false rape accusations. But I don't think that that's specifically intentional on their part. I think it's going to become very noticeable very quick. It's going to become undeniable very soon, because one of the things that's happened in the last couple of years has been that the realm of the internet has become more accessible to more people. So you have more different kinds of people on the internet, and so, but they're still very ignorant as to how everything works, and they don't understand that when you say something that is harmful, or you do something that is harmful online, that people remember and that people log it. And so what's happening is that these people are still engaging in these age-old practices of creating a scapegoat, or of hurting somebody in this meaningful way, and destroying their lives. They're doing something that has happened for a very, very long time, but only now are we really able to hold them accountable, because we can catch them in the act. And that's what is going to happen. We're going to see a lot of the fallout from that, I think, very shortly.
In all honesty, feminists should be the most angry at false rape.
Yes,
because
they should.
It's hurting women who actually do suffer from rape. You know, it also hurts men who get raped, but it hurts women the most because, you know, the biggest argument I hear from feminists is, oh, well, women are afraid to report that they got raped. And it's like, yeah,
what about men?
Because there's a lot of, well, yeah, men specifically, but it are also. But the thing is that women who are afraid to report rape are probably afraid to do so because there are so many people out there who are saying that all of these false rapes are happening, and it's starting to get to a point where I don't believe women who say they got raped. If they don't immediately go to the police and report that something happened, because all of these other women who are like, well, I got raped, but I don't want to go to the police to say anything, but I'll make a public spectacle about it because I want attention. I don't believe them for 1 minute.
Yeah.
And because of all of these false rape accusations that have happened, I don't believe that they do.
Yeah. And one of the main problems in all of this is that when they say, oh, well, you know, women are afraid to report. Well, what do they really have to lose overall? I mean, I know there are certain situations where if it's somebody who's very trusted in their community, or if it's a family friend, they might have something to lose in that respect. But if it's a stranger, or if it's someone that is, you know, an acquaintance to them, the only thing that they have to lose is hurting somebody that they previously cared about. Whereas when a man has to admit that he was raped and he wants something to be really done about it, he has to weigh the pros and cons, because the cons are that they have this fear that they're going to be perceived as being less than a man, because in either scenario, whether they were abused by a man or a woman, they have to, it means admitting that someone overcame them and victimized them in a way that is usually associated with being feminine because they associate being a victim with being a woman. And so it's not that being a woman is necessarily negative. It's just that because of these different perspectives on it, they have a lot of fears. There's a lot for them to lose, and they might just be laughed at overall for that. And so it's a big battle for them to really come forward and admit, like, this is what happened to me, and I want something to be done about it because I don't want this person to hurt anybody else. And so when these guys say, like, oh, well, you know, that they're afraid to come forward, I'm sorry, that's really bullshit. It's, what do you really have to lose overall? I mean, are you really going to lose your reputation? Nowadays, if somebody finds out that a woman has been raped, the immediate action is like, are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? When a man is raped, it's like, really? Are you serious? Like,
are you gay or something?
Yeah, like, oh, you didn't want it? Like, what happened in that respect? Like, what didn't you like? Or especially if it was an attractive woman.
Well, I want to address something that you said, because this is something that feminists often complain about as well. You said that one of the reasons why men don't come forward is that they'll lose their manhood, or like they'll be less of a man.
It's at least a fear in their minds, because
I want to address that a little bit more.
Okay.
Because feminists are like, oh no, they'll not be a man. Oh, that's so horrible because women have to go. No, what we're talking about here is that men are defined by what they can do for others. That they have to be this image of being really strong and really handsome, being a go-getter, being a risk taker. And this is the image that men have to live with. And if they are not these things, and look at my life. I'm not a very strong man. I'm not a very sexy man. I'm attractive, but I'm not very sexy. And I'm not really able to work anymore. And it's not like there are women knocking down my door trying to be with me. If anything, I'm useless to society, so no woman really wants to be interested in me. And because of my disability, I've pretty much lost the key to being a man in society. And the fear that men have about admitting that they were weak towards a woman, that they couldn't control a woman.
It's a loss of identity, basically.
It is. It very much is. I mean, if a woman comes up and punches me, I either run the risk of being considered weak, it's like, ha ha ha, you let a woman beat you up, or being a horrible person because I punched her back. And I think she deserves to be punched back if she punches me. But I'm going to be like, oh, how could you do that to a woman? You are a horrible person, and potentially go to jail for that. It's a catch-22. Either damn if you do or damn if you don't. And that is the world that men live in today.
Yeah, but feminists will call this toxic masculinity. They'll say this is the way that patriarchy hurts men too. And what they don't seem to understand is that these things are reinforced by both genders. It's expected by both women and men for men to behave in this way, for men to be defined by their actions in this way, and to be defined by this specific kind of masculinity. And even as much as these feminists talk about how they are going to be accepting of men who have been victimized and things like that, you have a whole bunch of other feminists who are saying, no, we don't want men in our spaces when we're talking about rape, because we feel that they take away from our experiences by just existing. And so there's this, they're saying, oh, well, we think we're going to be more than welcoming to men who express themselves in ways that are not considered to be typically masculine. We're going to be accepting, but we don't want them in our spaces. We don't want them in our spaces. They're not really allowed to be full feminists. They're not allowed to be anything more than allies. All of these things. You're still considered to be a second-class citizen in all of their spaces. And they're like, yes, please come over here. Come be a second-class citizen in feminism, and we'll let you talk about how you were raped and victimized. But don't you dare take away the spotlight from women. Don't you dare do that, because that's bad. That makes you a shitlord, and you're a terrible person if you even suggest that you were victimized in a way that can be compared to that of a woman.
And the big kicker to all of this, when it comes to a male getting raped, is it worth losing everything about your identity as a man for a woman who may not even go to jail? I mean, there
Yes.
are women rapists who will simply say, I promise to never do it again, and they go out without serving any jail time, or they'll
Yeah.
go out on probation, or if they even do serve any jail time, it's usually like 6 months to a year. There's a report of a man who got accused of raping a woman and was pretty much supposed to spend like the next 20 years in prison, but a year later it was found that she lied about it and she
Yeah.
only got 6 months in jail.
Mm.
This is the kind of system that we have. And I do see in the chat that women do receive less prison time than men. And
Yes,
that
they
is
do.
a very big issue right
It's
there.
completely
But that's
ridiculous.
what we're dealing with in our society. That anything bad that a woman can do, she will most likely get a slap on the wrist compared to what a man does. So is it worth risking our masculinity to try to get a woman to be punished and for her to simply walk away?
Yeah, it's really ridiculous. If a woman does the exact same crime as a man, she should have to serve those sentences. She should have to be sentenced in a similar fashion. And if you are not willing to let a woman sit in jail as long as a man does, if you're not willing to give them the same kind of punishment, maybe you should reconsider the kind of punishment that you're giving to men overall. If it's simply too harsh for a woman, maybe you need to reconsider how we're sentencing men, how we're sending men into the prison system and then leaving them with very few tools to better themselves once they get out. Maybe we really need to consider what we are doing to people, how we've privatized the prison system and created it, and used it to be this money-making venture. And right now it is. There's an entire business around the prison system, around making sure that a certain amount of people end up in that system, and usually it's in for drug charges, and usually lesser drug charges.
So I'm going to go ahead and read a couple of things from the chat between, well, Sarah LaFemme answering this question. Actually, it was Eric Martin who first answered this question. Men need protection from mean women sometimes, and I agree with that. I mean, if a man is being physically attacked by a woman, he's not allowed to do anything to defend himself because then it becomes domestic violence. Even then, a mean woman could abuse a man, then call the cops and say, hey, this man is abusing me, take him to jail, and they will take him to jail even if there's no physical evidence to support the crime.
Yeah. Everybody, I think, at least knows, has at least met or knows of one crazy ass bitch who has been violent to another human being. And you would think to yourself, oh, this, we need to protect this guy from this girl because she is not quite right. And she is certainly violent and, and could really cause some serious problems. But people almost downplay that. Like if a woman goes and does things like she slashes his tires or she spreads rumors around, or if she tries to beat the crap out of him or does beat the crap out of him, they think of it as a lesser thing. But if you think about things like the Jodi Arias trial, what actually happened going up to the murder? She was engaging in all of these crazy stalking behaviors. I think she did slash his tires. She did engage in all of these typical abusive behavior things that you would associate with someone who is crazy and obsessed and definitely mentally ill, and who probably someone probably should have protected him from. But we look at these behaviors and we say, well, these things, they're simply not as bad as when a man does it. It's, I don't know how anyone could even say that.
Well, and in those situations as well is, does the man get believed? That's the other problem with reporting rape. Men often get laughed at or doesn't get believed if they call a hotline for domestic violence, they get told, well, then you shouldn't have started anything, get laughed at, or basically told, there's nothing we can do for you.
Yeah, we have no place to take you, or when they bring it into court. Like, I think there was actually that one case where there was a much older gentleman, and his I think his ex, I think he was going through a divorce, and they thought they were going to I think that they were rekindling their romance again, when in reality she was just trying to lure him into a false sense of security so that she could then try to cut off his dick with a pair of kitchen shears. And of course she didn't manage to cut it off, but she definitely wounded him in a meaningful way, and he tried to take her to court over it, and they threw it out of court.
All a woman has to do. And that's one of the points that are brought up, is that women have legal protections and rights over men.
So if a woman tries to assault you in a meaningful way and tries to cut off your penis, and you end up in the wrong court where people just are going to laugh at you, oh, well, it wasn't cut off. I mean, I think it would have to have been cut off for them to even say, oh, well, I guess we're going to hold her accountable. I mean, she could kill a man. Like the Jodi Arias trial, people had a problem with sentencing her for either sentencing options, which would be life in prison or the death penalty. They had problems with coming to either conclusion, even though it was very obvious to them that she was entirely guilty, and that there wasn't a single question in their mind. Please, by all means, go and look at those crime scene photos, and you tell me whether or not those sentences were out of bounds, because it was really, really gruesome.
Well, there's also the case, and I think it was in Canada, of the man and woman who basically raped and killed a whole bunch of women. And when they got arrested, she first claimed that she was forced into it, until they found a videotape of her seducing her own sister so he could rape her, and then they both murdered her. She did go to jail, but then there was a feminist group that helped her get out of jail, and she was able to start a whole new life and have children, even though she helped rape and murder other women. But her husband still remains in jail and has to serve out a full sentence.
You'll often find that this is something that happens again and again. Whenever there is a man who is engaging in a behavior that is criminal, and there's a woman who is enabling and outright engaging in the crimes with him, they will always serve shorter sentences. They'll say, oh, well, she must have been coerced into it. Well, I mean, here there's another case I'm going to give you, and this is a little more high profile, so you can find this out there, and you've probably heard of it: the kidnapping of J.C. Lee Dugard, who was held for many, many years as basically a sexual slave, kidnapped when I think she was like 11 years old, and who was raped and had to birth the 2 children of her rapist. And who was there enabling this every step of the way, and even aided in the kidnapping? His wife, his legal wife. And she looked the other way when he was holding her in the backyard, basically, and who would, who knew she was there, who engaged with her, who spoke with her, who would even make comments and say, oh shit, she's pregnant. Well, what are we going to do about this? Well, we certainly can't take her to a proper hospital. She engaged in this every step of the way, and she, in my opinion, certainly she wasn't doing the raping, but she certainly didn't stop it either, and knew it was taking place and enabled it. And that was, it was a terrible, terrible thing that happened to her. And to downplay that is really, in my opinion, a disservice to victims who go through these things, to downplay the actions of these women who see another woman going through this stuff and simply enable this abuse, and who engage in the abuse themselves. And then people will say, well, this isn't as meaningful as what happened, as what the man did.
And what happened to her? Did she serve any jail time?
I think so, but it was a much lesser sentence.
Okay.
And she, like I said, she was holding her down in the back seat of the car when she was kidnapped. She engaged in all this stuff. She knew about it. She didn't do anything about it. She enabled every step of the way, and she's just as fucking guilty. But of course, you see this happen in these teams of people who engage in criminal behavior and enable, and the women always serve a shorter sentence.
And this is why I think misandry is so more prevalent than misogyny, because we see things like this, that women are basically downplayed when any crime happens. They get lesser sentences. They get a slap on the wrist when they rape an underage child, especially if they're a teacher. But if the reverse is true, it's so much worse than men. This is why misandry is so much worse than misogyny, because women are given a special pass for everything.
Yeah.
It's very hard for a woman to be treated like a man in anything because she has so much more privilege in our society.
Yeah. And if a guy were to have a fundamental distrust of women and or even outright hatred of women as a result of something like that, I mean, I would say that, you know, I'd be fine. I would say that their feelings to some degree are justified, but eventually they need to realize that not all women are like this. But I think, you know, those feelings are in some ways justified. Like if you were this young kid, like let's say you were 8 years old and you were being raped by a woman in ways that were really traumatizing to you. Well, rape is always, I would say, traumatic to some degree. But if you went through all this stuff and you found that your rapist, the person who hurt you, and especially if they were a close family friend or even family, and they hurt you in this real meaningful way, and nobody did anything about it, I would imagine that you would have a lot of emotional baggage attached to that.
Well, as I always say, our society is built around the idea of men and women protecting women, but men and women not protecting men. But I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I thank you so much for coming out, Rachel. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
It's always fun, and I have an excuse to talk with one of my friends, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. Mad Cat here is a fantastic guy. You should probably read his books. I think because he's a very insightful person. I haven't read any of his works, but I would imagine that he's got a lot to say. And I think
my
next
book's going to be good because it's going to feature 5 male characters.
Ooh.
And there are no primary female characters. I know feminists are going to take big issue with that.
Brick.
What's up?
It's gonna be more than that. They're gonna shit a brick. They're gonna be like, there are not enough female characters in this.
One friend already has told me that I'm going to be criticized because one of my character is a Spaniard who's Jewish. So I'm going for a 2-fer on that one. I'm like, really? That's a problem? I can historically prove that he's a Hispanic Jew, and suddenly I'm bad because I'm making him 2 things in one. It's funny, but you know what? That doesn't stop me from doing it. But thank you so much, Rachel, for coming out.
No problem.
And thank you for the endorsement too.
Yeah. I gotta pimp you because all of my favorite badgers and stuff who happen to be male, they don't get nearly as much attention as I think they really deserve because they're always doing a whole bunch of stuff in the background that people don't get to see. And so people are like, oh my gosh, Karen, and oh my gosh, Hannah, and Allison. Those people are great. Like they do wonderful things as well. But I think far too often you guys don't get nearly the kind of attention that you deserve. and I don't know how to solve that other than to sit here and pimp you.
Well, I definitely agree with that. I do have conversations about that with many others about how much harder it is to be a male on YouTube. Like there are some really big ones out there, but there are a lot of us that are really just trying to be part of the solution, and it gets harder for us. But you know, definitely like Brian and Mike and Nephenor and even Marshall. We do a lot of good work
Thanks,
out there,
Dave.
so definitely check us out. But
Yeah.
I thank you for that, Rachel. And I'm going to go ahead and end this now. As you can see, we still got quite a bit to go through. Next section will be interesting, and hopefully we'll have some really great guests to discuss all of this. But if you get a chance, go ahead and take this survey, because I want this number right here to be at 1,000. I want to be able to
420,
shut
bitch.
feminists up with this. What's up, Rachel?
420, biatch.
So-
Every day.
So anyways, thank you for Rachel coming out. Thank you to all my fans for coming out. And this is Mad Cat signing off.